Hello and welcome back, and no, these aren't little replica pieces from the movie Aliens. This is a NAS, and this is an AI engine. That's right, today we want to talk about the LCMD server and the AI pod. These are kind of a twofer. We can get them independently, rolling out soon on Kickstarter. And quite frankly, this has been one of the most complicated NAS reviews that I've ever had to prepare for in advance of a video. Now, why is that? Well, as I consult my massive range of notes that I've been making over the course of the last couple of weeks, it is because this on my side here might be one of the most well put together compact flash NAS solutions I've ever seen. Look at the size of it. And at the same time, this might be the most complicated pain in the arse piece of kit that promises so much and can certainly deliver on it, but is just not finished. This is a review of these devices, and I'm going to try my best to differentiate my feelings on both devices, and ultimately by the end of this I'm hoping to help you decide whether this campaign deserves your buns. But remember, crowdfunding. This is not traditional retail. So if you are looking at this, just know this is going in development, and indeed one big message you're going to find throughout the course of this video is that these products aren't finished. They're just not. In terms of hardware, I think they almost bang on the money, although a little bit of cooling wouldn't go amiss. But in terms of software, certainly there are a ways to go. What do you actually get for your money in terms of hardware if you do opt to back this? Well, before we even get to this, and if there are other reviews out there, I'm sure they're going to touch on this. The retail packaging these rolled out with, I wouldn't normally spend that much time talking about packaging unless it stands out, but my God, it stood out. It was one of the most attractive, pretty retail kits I've ever received here on the channel. They should make a difference, because let's face it, that's a day one and then day forget thing. But I just wanted to touch on that. In terms of presentation, it really was well put together, like a shuttle pod that opened up at the top with a glass perspex thing at the top. It was absolutely beautiful. After that, of course, we can talk about what we actually get inside those pretty little boxes. Now, this here is the LC03. It arrives in two different chassis designs. I'd say designs, its colour scheme, the kind of grey one and this white and orange one. It's got a lovely little LED thing at the front, a little bit Knight Rider during boot there for the line going back and forth. Inside here, by the way, is 7 storage bays. There's one Gen 4x4 M.2 slot there for the operating system. There are an additional 4 M.2 NVMe's at Gen 4x1, Gen 3x1 speed each. And finally, there are 2 SATA 2.5-inch bays there at the base inside. Now, the current going rate for that, they're going for that early deposit scheme system at the time of recording, and you can get the device with 2 TB of storage and 16 gig of memory, and that arrives at $769, but you have to do that deposit thing, which I'm not overly keen on. When it does roll out in crowdfunding at the end of August, I think there's going to be a slight increase on that price. So if you do want that low price, you've got to do the deposit system, but it's still going to be cheaper than the eventual intended retail price if it does pass development there. Now, on the other side of the table, we've got this. Now, this is basically, you know the phrase, a computer with a graphics card inside? This is a graphics card with a computer inside. So a development board, the NVIDIA Jetson AGX Orin inside there, part of the NVIDIA Ampere AI engine inside there, supporting up to a potential 275 tera operation per second. Alongside that, a 12-core ARM processor inside with its own little bit of oomph, and 2 M.2 NVMe's at Gen 4x4 each. Indeed, this system also has a 10 GBE and a 2.5 GBE port, and KVM there, keyboard video mouse with USB 10 gig and HDMI output of 2.1. And this can run on its own for the AI services. However, it is designed to work in tandem with the AI system here. Now, for such a small size device, I will say this thing, for power inside and that amount of storage, this arrives with a 13th generation i5. That's a 12-core i5 with 16 threads to play with. That's 28 lanes to spread out amongst this. So as impressed as I am at the amount of hardware crammed inside here, by the way, with 2 cooling fans and a copper pipe system with the CPU as well, with the storage somewhat in the middle there, and a single sodium slot there, 16 gigs supporting up to 64 gig of DDR5, not ECC by the way, I will say immediately, Why the hell is it only got one 2.5 gig port there? That is infuriating, especially if you remember, as I said, this has 10 gig, and I know it's because they built on top of an existing development board there, but given the amount of storage on this, that is a huge bottleneck in terms of external performance. And it does have a myriad of USB 5 gig and 10 gig ports on the rear, along with an HDMI that the software allows you to output multimedia through as well. But still, that is going to peeve people off. Another thing that's going to peeve people off, and again, I'm sorry to keep flicking and flocking between the two devices, this thing, even with that early deposit, is $2,500. In fact, if you want to get better configurations of the device, better storage inside, the same goes with this going up, I believe, to $999, and then I think around $1,200. This goes nuts, and you can get them bundled together, but this is still a crowdfunding project that is asking you to lay down thousands on a brand you've not heard of, which I know is going to be tremendously off-putting for some. Now, we will dig into the software, the AI features later in the video, but as a very quick summary for those that want to know, if we move slightly away from the AI pod and onto the NAS, this device here pretty much has a ready-to-go software out the box. You can set up with a mobile, set up with a desktop, with the client tool as well, or via the web browser. It was very, very straightforward. There was actually a few different layers, by the way, of security encryption that I'll talk about later on, and encrypted access to the device. Indeed, you can encrypt the whole storage and dismount it at boot if you choose, which is a weirdly rare proposal for a lot of brands. Also, I will say, very important, this device doesn't need to only be used with their software. I found out the FAQ and tested it myself. By going into the device, I was able to boot Unraid on this. There was no watchdog limitations. There was nothing hard-baked stopping me using my own operating system of choice. Indeed, when I went into the BIOS settings there was a tremendous degree of configuration built into the BIOS there. They've not capped it or limited it or gone for a bespoke BIOS firmware that's restricted a lot of the access to things. You can pretty much drink around all you want. So going back to that price of $769, I will say, for what you're getting at the scale and the power and the storage ability, if you overlook the lack of 10 gig, if maybe something like a Proxmox server, it becomes a little bit more reasonable, especially when you look at mini PCs in the market with a similar level of hardware, but only one SSD, and they only have 2.5 gig. Some of those rocking around $399 to $500 there. So the increase there of around $200 or so, given it includes 2 TB and 16 gig of DDR5, is a little more palatable when you're looking at it with third-party operating systems. But even if you're using the inclusive software on there, when I had the system up and running and setting in idle, it wasn't low powered. Because of that CPU, of course, it was still sitting at 27 to 28 watts in idle. Now, during utility, it went all the way up to 50, close to 60 watts, which wasn't ideal. But again, given the size of the device and the CPU, that wasn't the end of the world once you put it into the context of a system of this scale. But at least the idle power use there, not great. And the default software that it's arriving with is still nowhere near mature enough to allow you to configure and change a lot of the power states outside of something like BIOS. When I went in with Jellyfin to test the CPU, apologies for the terrible audio quality in this section, I realised I didn't include the power consumption of the AI pod. So I'm just adding it here on the fly during the editing. As you can see here, the system was utilising around 75 to 78 watts, and that was to create a 3-second video using the AI pod there. It took around 10 to 11 seconds. Once it was done, we could see the video that got generated there from the single sentence prompt I provided, but I wanted to include it here, just a little understanding of just what the power spike would be to create a short video. With regards to multimedia, it comfortably, without breaking a sweat, played 2 8K streams and a 4K stream, with the CPU rarely getting out of 15 watts. I think it sat around 15 to 20 watts overall. But of course, heat. That is going to be a concern. And although I could talk about the heat of this little AI pod, and I'll be honest, it sat around 38 to 45 during idle, and it cranked into the 50s when it was during heavy AI generation. This, on the other hand, the NAS sat about 32 to 34, and once we got real close, we could see the units there sitting at around 42 degrees now. During heavy use, that went up to closer to 50, but it still wasn't that bad in terms of the heat generation inside. Indeed, the noise of the system wasn't actually too bad either when it was at peak. Those are 2 smaller silent ball bearing fans, and it wasn't actually too off-putting when both fans were ramped up. Again, something I couldn't do very easily within the native software, but luckily I was able to play with it in Unraid. But there's no avoiding that. Price tag that you're paying here definitely has to cover the software and development to a point. So let's dig into the software capabilities of this NAS alongside their own software just to see how much of that price it can be justified towards. Now, given the price tag that this device is rocking out in, particularly on crowdfunding, I think it has to be said that value for money in terms of software is kind of going to be a deal breaker for a lot of users. And although the official page does go to a lot of detail talking about the security protocol that have been rolled in here, along with the feature set and application support, I do think it's worth breaking down a little bit more into where the software is at now and where they say it will be, because in crowdfunding that is a huge distinction. Now, that system control seems to fall via two main doorways. One is a client application that allows you to manage the microserver and portals into some of the AI services, and the other one is a dedicated browser experience that allows you, not dissimilar to that of remote accessed LLM and AI tools, to manage the AI supported services that this can provide. We'll be going through both of them, but for now, let's go through that client. We're going through the Windows client there as well. So here it is on screen. We'll bring that up. I've already got it loaded in, and as we go to those bottom three lines there at the bottom, we're able to see there the full device. We've got the device all connected up. We've already named it there. We're running on software version 1.3.9, so crucially this is not a pre-version 1. No doubt if and when this does ship from crowdfunding, the software will hopefully see several more revisions in that time. Again, it's all fairly standard stuff there. The ability to mount a cloud drive, for example, you're able to kind of bolt that on there quite easily within your operating system and mounting it. But as you can see, mount successfully there achieved. Now, on top of that, we can move forward. We've got the language control. But one of the things I do want to highlight is localization on this could be better. And you'll see what I mean more about that later on when we go through the tools. But I just wanted to highlight I am using English language mode. There's the light and dark mode there. We'll need to restart the app when it. And now we can go a little bit into this client application itself for desktop. I've already installed a bunch of applications here. They do make quite a loud noise on their website about just how many apps and services you can install. And it won't come as a huge surprise that these are containerized applications there. So this is still an app center with regards to a lot of kind of custom made tools or existing third-party client tools that have been, repackaged in a container for utilization in here. There's a huge amount to choose from there. But I'm not going to give the brand too much credit for having an app center there that is essentially a container repository, where a lot of these, we're not exactly going to give them credit for Jellyfin. They didn't make Jellyfin. But for example, clicking install, bang, it is installing there. We'll come back to Jellyfin later on. But for now, we can look at the applications it includes, because this is where I think for a device that is trying to provide an AI-ready NAS out-the-gate solution, it is having difficulty finding its identity, I think, between a product that DIY users that could build something like this from scratch themselves are going to like, and turnkey NAS solutions that would want something like this, but it's probably not quite as user-friendly as they would like. So, for example, we've got these tools and apps here, but if we go through it, so for example, their cloud drive is that file management tool. Now, on the mobile application, you have a lot more direct access to the cloud drive file folder management, but this client tool doesn't allow me to do it within this window, which seems kind of odd to me. But there is a standard file folder access method here. We've got everything in here. We can go through, we can go into the files. There's that Plex collection. We can go into photos there. Let's find a random photo, click that one there. And again, we've got the standard stuff there. We don't have a contextual right-click manual option, but we can look at some of the options there. I'm not going to say it's game-changing, but at least you've got that option to file folder management. And we will come round to security and access later on, because that is something we are going to have to return to. As you can see, basic settings there, contextual to different kind of file types. You can modify a lot of the options there. Again, not a huge number of configurable options there, but at least I've got the base level stuff. You can remote mount third-party storage there, be it cloud storage, be it an SMB there, so Samba, and indeed cloud storage later on, you can bolt some of those on. And again, different services, all of which you can add as and when you need them there. Now, returning to the client tool, again, other applications like the AI-based ones, open them up within this state. So, for example, text to video, we can see that the model there, I haven't loaded it in. I can load that model in and we can take advantage of that there. And while it does that in the background, you may notice if we open up another one. So for now, let's go for text to image. It opens it up and the model is loaded in. But crucially, we're still not able to access the AI immediately through here. For that, we're going to need to use the browser-based tool, something I'll come on to later on. But as I say, that is what I mean about the two-door policy, but also the slight confliction for a user-friendly, easy, turnkey-minded individual that will look at a solution like this. And again, once you think about the price tag this is rocking out the gate with, it's finding that line between those that know what they're doing that could build this and those that don't know what they're doing but are going to have difficulty navigating some of these options. And I think this is going to be a challenge for a solution like this to find that balance. The video player there, again, I understand what they're going for here. So for example, you select open file, you find the video file that you want to play. So if I go for one of my Plex files here, let's select roast duck there, it's like 45 seconds long, and it plays it in the web browser. Indeed, we can stream it to a local accessible network TV if we choose to. Mute that there. We can go ahead if we choose, change the resolution there. We've got a good, decent integrated graphics CPU speed playlist. But again, this, although we can control this and via the HDMI output as well, I will say this isn't strictly what I'm looking for in a video player. I know I'm accessing this via a web browser, but still. Now, from here we can go a lot more into the back end if we use the Jupyter application, where you can have a great deal more of analytical control. And although not everyone is going to use this, I am going to say that they have made the trouble of giving the different skill level users a different way into this system to kind of use it in whichever way they want. Some of that has been achieved again by using third-party tools instead of first-party tools, but the options are there. So for example, if we look into the to-do list application there, to-do list, as you can see, we've not run yet, so it has to deploy it. By default, it isn't getting booted up at the beginning, and then it deploys it. From that point, it'll always be available. And again, it has packaged a lot of that command line, packaged or redistributed and reshaped a lot of the containerized outlook there to be into a more turnkey deployment. But still, I do think the way this has been approached in terms of how things are being deployed, how things are controlled on this, is going to have difficulty being understood by novice users compared with users that are far more well versed in these things, that will question the need for this. And circling back to those that know what they're doing about this, if we go to that Bolama, from there we're able to run different AI models, which is all fair and well. But if you don't know what you're doing, this is still a reliance on an existing third-party selection of LLMs that you can deploy, and a number of these are already on the system already. But still, this isn't really what I'm looking for in terms of easy AI deployment. This is still having to do a lot of the work. I'd like the idea that I can manipulate, control, and configure these. Having an option is good, but it's the idea it's still a very intimidating proposition out the gate. And I think there are definitely going to be users out there that are going to find this just as intimidating as trying to deploy an existing AI LLM via Docker on their existing NAS system, even without the AI pod. The client tool does feature, though, system configuration as you would come to expect there. Everything from the user information right the way down to managing the hardware, getting real-time information about it, setting up that one-click copy there, which is streamlined to a huge degree. On top of that, you've got utilization of individual users there. Again, keep in mind it coming down to that decentralization and zero trust architecture that we're going to talk about in a moment. This is all fairly good stuff, and a lot of the improvements in terms of security that this is proposing over alternatives in the market are very much back-end and things that you're not going to see immediately out the gate. On top of that, you've got the areas of storage there. You can see it's managing the temperature all right, I would say. The system OS drive is quite low to the bottom of the system, and this is without me taxing the system too much. Those SSDs are sitting at around 40 odd degrees. So I would have liked to have seen them maybe a few degrees lower, but we are still talking about 7 different storage drive potential in such a small chassis. What is it, like 100mm by 120mm? And then you've got things like managing the network drive, where you can add Samba there directly rather than using that browser-based appliance there in the file manager. And then finally managing the network there. Not only the wired network, that single 2.5 gig, again, what a miss. On top of that, managing the Wi-Fi connection there for some failover and finding out real-time information about it using Bluetooth, adding other networks as well manually. They're all built in there. But while we're talking about networks, while we're talking about access, while we're talking, for example, about the backups happening in real time there and how much we're going to trust them and trust the data integrity, security, and encryption, we've got to talk about just what sets this device apart from alternatives in the market in terms of security. Now, a big part of the security proposition of this device comes down to its dependence on hardware security rather than software security there. So it's effectively saying that it treats every single device app, whatever it's connecting with any time, as untrusted I should say, until it's been verified within your network settings there. So all transmission to and from the device uses end-to-end VPN encryption, which by the way is included with the device. On top of that, you've got hardware level security design, which means, again, this isn't something that's baked into the software on top. It's actually working in partnership with the hardware, something that can often be used for a vulnerability or a workaround. And every device will require a one-time password code to be utilized for new connections, and disconnecting existing connections when needed is easy to set up. Remote access is done with higher performance, they state, and still being very, very secure over both NAT3 and NAT4 firewall restrictions, again, across the device, thanks to it being hard baked in from the ground up. So again, removing a lot of those bottlenecks that encrypted transmission can cause. Again, taking advantage of two-step authentication with every single one of those connections. Then you've got that cross-platform VPN, which is effectively a point-to-point system in terms of its VPN protocol and transmission, comparable to something like Tailscale, which is going to ensure that it creates a private encrypted network between the devices, but point to point where needed. With multiple protocols being listed together, although I'm not quite sure how RAID and WebDAV have all been listed as protocols together when one of them is a configuration, but still nonetheless it's nice to see those included. And of course BTRFS means you are going to be looking at things like snapshots there, and RAID of course your disk failover, and as long as you've got SMB and NFS, I didn't see any iSCSI, but maybe there's an app for that. At least these are all being available there on day one. And circling back to Zero Trust, keep in mind that one of the biggest focuses on this device they're saying is about decentralization. So rather than relying on a third-party server or a branded relay server, you can ensure that this device only talks point to point with the trusted device that you choose to connect it with. So peer-to-peer encrypted transfers means that you're not going to be using a relay service based in China, America, Taipei, Europe, anywhere. You are just going to be connecting point to point with your devices, and thanks to that secure NAT transversal, it's going to be done as securely as possible. This is going to greatly reduce man-in-the-middle attacks, and once again, we're talking about hardware security design, so that is TPN encrypted chips being used. These take advantage of 256-bit encryption, or AES 256, is great, meaning that when you are transferring that data and no longer reliant on a platform in the middle for the transfer of data, it's going to be really useful to know that both the client device and the server that you're going to be communicating with are going to have that level of security. Again, we are going to have to base it on a lot of what they're saying here, because it's very hard to prove this in the field, and we are still talking about a product in development, but fair play for a device that is really going the extra mile to detail in quite great effort. And again, you can go into a lot of their own pages here to find out more information about how they intend to bridge the question of security on their system. Also, comparable to something like TrueNAS in its jail system, the way it separates different applications, they call it the PPCM, or Precise Permission Control Matrix. It allows all applications and services running on the system to be completely isolated, so they can't really affect each other's data. So if you do install an application or service that ends up to be a bit ropey, it can't extend beyond the boundaries of its own containerized deployment at all. Now let's move away from the NAS and over to the AI pod here, because, the elephant in the room, that is a dev board that already exists, that you can already buy in various configurations. So really, when you are buying this, which once again is in crowdfunding, a lot of weight is going to have to be carried by the software there and the capabilities, because ultimately this device has one major promise to deliver on, and that is easy local access to an AI. Now, by that I mean most users now, with a quick Google, can find some AI service online for content generation, or for AI tools built into your very web browser, into your very devices, for translation, for summarization, for content generation of sorts. This is about having those services in your own network, and done so without the complexity of deploying an AI, an existing AI model via containerization, and the multifaceted configuration and tweaky setup early doors. That's what you will be paying extra for. And I will say, This sort of delivers on that, but not to the end goal, not to completion, and certainly not, I would say, to a degree where a novice is going to be able to buy this and have full access to an extended range of AI services. Now, if you want, you can use this as your AI middleman. You can use this for translation of existing web pages, use it for transcription, summarization, and more while browsing YouTube or listening to podcasts. You can use it to transcribe your existing range of photo and video content. You can strip all of that information and be able to search it natively. Things like semantic search and RAG search allow you to intelligently search your system and find the files you need. Also, in conjunction with LLM and AI services for content creation, right the way down to photos and video, are all possible on this device. However, you are going to be reliant on utilizing pre-existing AI models that you're able to download directly onto the system via their software, but still nonetheless, it's going to require a bit of understanding and knowledge when an entire list of AI models is presented to you, with sub-revisions, by the way, in each of them being very, very complex, knowing which one's good for what. Are you going to go for the biggest storage one because you think it's the best? That's not necessarily true, as time has told, in terms of efficiency too. When it comes to photo and video generation, it does the job, and I was able to generate photos and video utilizing this device to varying degrees of success. But the minute you want to do more than the very basic stuff, it becomes considerably more complicated. For a start, you have no real manner of configuring these AI implemented generative tools to a large degree. And when you do want to do that outside of the chewable user-friendly tools, then it becomes so overwhelmingly complicated that you're not much better off than if you've gone the full DIY in the first place. I will say it serves as a fantastic gateway into local AI and centralized management of AI services in your home or business environment, but I'm by no means going to say after the first few days that it isn't going to become increasingly complicated. For example, if you do want to use this in conjunction with this other NAS device, the LCO3, or on its own, although you're going to deploy the AI, things like administration control, individual access to individual users there, which files and folders it can access, sensitive information, sensitive searches, people that are going to use the AI for bad purposes, bad agents that are going to abuse this or use AI services to do bad things and create bad things. There aren't any limitations. There are no ways to disable that without going deep into the command line in the background, and even the tools they provide are still presented incredibly complexly, which means that the easy gateway into AI that this is promoting, I think, is quite, shallow, and soon you're going to need to have a deeper understanding of AI, which I would argue something like this is sort of aiming towards you not needing to have to a point. It would be tremendously unfair of me to judge this as a completed product, because it isn't. But they're not saying it is either. It's going to crowdfunding, it is a product in development, and because of that, I'm not going to flat out say whether this is good or bad. I can only tell you the positive and negative experiences I've had with this. So, unfortunately, if we go down the negative route, number one, some client tools were flagged as viruses by my Windows system. That's not unusual, because a lot of the time Windows, particularly Windows 11, requires registration of applications and services, and if you download them outside of their own app center, they can be flagged erroneously, and once I checked them with Malwarebytes and stuff like that, they were absolutely fine. Localization of the application and services has a ways to go, but the brand has told me they are doubling down on this, and the eventual product people are going to see is going to be considerably more localized, and the customization of the localization is going to be better. More clarity about what AI services are being conducted locally and which ones of them are pulling from external services needs to be clearer, because certain checks when we had the system up and running with the unified controller in the background clearly showed that remote access was being pinged. But it wasn't telling me that it was doing that. So promoting it in many cases as a local AI, which, let's face it, at this price point and this hardware, it bloody well should be, needs to be clearer. Also, 2.5 GBE, are you killing me? The simplicity of AI setup is really, really easy. But the problem is it's being promoted very clearly as easy local AI access, when I think there is still a degree of complexity they could stand to be a lot more transparent about. The same goes with those client tools. I had to keep hopping between different tools like the AI browser tool, the Windows downloaded browser tool, and more to get things done. It felt a little clunky, but that is almost certainly something they're going to change over time. I do think they could stand to separate the advertising and marketing of these products, the AI stuff and the non-AI stuff, because I think this thing I really like, barring the 2.5G. This is well put together. It's a great piece of construction, and for the price tag, I would say you're getting quite a lot. I'm not going to say it's perfect, and it is a powerhouse user device in terms of its hardware profile, but there's a lot to be said. I just wish it had 10G. I'll stop harping on. They are promising easy access to AI here, and I think they could stand to be a little clearer about it. And given it is running on an existing development board, that software at the moment didn't feel complete enough to warrant the high price tag when you could just buy the hardware as it exists, not in this pretty state, of course, and download the tools that are available online and the containerized applications as well, which, by the way, this had a huge arrangement of containerized apps ready to go. They could stand to be clearer, and I think, again, as a product, it doesn't feel finished. And I just think for a lot of users, they need to know that before they back a project like this. I do think they will deliver this. I think whatever you buy here, they are going to deliver. There's too much hardware on the table, and there's too much comms from them, the way they've approached this, for this to be fake. I do think, however, that how much of the realised end solution is up for debate, at least at this time, but it's still early days. As for Positives, solidly well put together, 7 bays of storage at that price, fantastic. And the software, you're not locked in with their own, so you just know that you can use your own. And it's so bloody easy on the eye. It is a lovely bit of work, a lovely bit of construction. And we also have to warrant that for a NAS solution coming out of the East that is using an OS that no one's familiar with, they've gone to a lot of trouble with that encrypted peer-to-peer access, with a lot of the two-factor authentication. The way this has been set up in terms of security is a large way ahead of a number of DIY up-and-coming NAS solutions that I've talked about in the past in terms of software and indeed in terms of hardware. This with hardware security at the ground level and multiple layers of security built in on day one, something a lot of Eastern brands do not factor in anywhere near enough to the satisfaction of Western audiences, has to be applauded. This I really like. This I have mixed feelings about. Let me know what you guys think. At the time of recording, the campaign's not live. Again, I think it's going to go live at the end of October, so do check that out. And when it's live, I'll link to it in the description below. But let me know what you guys think. Have you backed this? Are you interested in this? Maybe you should give some feedback to the brand. I'm almost certainly going to be watching this, so you can read about it in the description. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.